Okay, hey everybody. I'm back. Baby is sleeping again. Just put a boob in his mouth. So convenient. I love breastfeeding. It's the best thing ever. All right, so we were talking, I think, about Pitocin. So when they give you Pitocin, the contractions that are caused are way more intense than the contractions that would occur naturally. So when what the contractions are is the uterus squeezing. When the uterus squeezes, the baby's head moves down, and what happens is the cervix is, I believe the terminology, effaces. So the cervix slowly, if you have this like little donut shaped piece of flesh, what it does is during the contractions it flattens and spreads so that the cervix, that's this little itty bitty donut looking thing, can actually get open and move away, so it becomes thinner. So a good way to look at it is like a balloon. If you blow a balloon, it's like the rubber is thick, but when you put air in it, it like thins out and spreads out. So that is what happens during the contraction period. When the Pitocin happens, it makes it like, I don't know, I've heard different statistics, but I'll say approximately about 10 times harder, stronger, the contraction. So that creates a really, one, it hurts way more. And birth by itself, I had an all-natural birth until the end there, hurts. Birth just hurts, okay? And unless you're super duper zen about it and you have everything you need. For me, my birth was energetically, I didn't have strong boundaries, and so I believe that it was harder and longer than it needed to be if I would have put my foot down about some things that I didn't. That's a whole other story. But when we are given permission to birth how we want to birth, it can be extremely, as opposed to pain, you feel surges. So I hear. Mine was painful. So painful, the worst pain I've ever had in my entire life. I can't imagine what that would have felt like on Pitocin, as they've done scans and the pressure or the way the contraction comes is just stronger. So that, with the mom being like ow 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 and the baby having to come down, can easily cause more distress to the baby, and then they say the baby's in distress, which causes more interventions. One of the things I want to educate about in the birth realm is they like to monitor the baby. What that actually means is, unless it's an external monitor that they put outside to get the heartbeat on their little deep, 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 what they will do if they're not using it externally, or they say like, we can't hear the baby, one, they'll scare you that, oh my God, we can't hear the baby. But two, they want to put an external monitor on the baby's head, which means that they will go inside of your womb, inside your cervix, and where the baby's head is, they will put a little circular blade to literally stick inside of their scalp. So they are causing, they're lacerating your newborn's head. They're like, oh, it's fine. No, that shit is not fine. They can't tell if it hurts them or not. They say it doesn't. How can you getting a laceration on your little baby head not hurt? Like, then sometimes they're like, oh, I can't get it. And they'll do it again. And they'll do it again. I recently had a mother tell me that the thing that hurt them the most, themselves, more than the contractions that are during their pregnancy, their labor, was getting that little thing put on their baby's head. Yeah, so I am not a proponent of that at all. I think that's ridiculous. So yeah, other things that they do. I want to speak to epidurals. One of the things that happens in the Western medical industrial paradigm during labor is they will tell you all the reasons you should be scared of not getting the intervention, but they don't tell you all of the risks of the intervention. They'll show you maybe a thing to sign and read and all of the small print, but you're in labor. You're not going to read that or understand it necessarily. That's why it's good to have a doula. So make sure you get a doula. The epidural. Okay, so I'm really grateful for this. I've seen epidurals go really wrong, and I've seen them go really well. One of my first hospital births, the woman who got the epidural was unaware, as was I, because I hadn't been in a hospital birth before, or I hadn't been in a hospital birth where they use an epidural. They were unaware that when you get an epidural, you can't use your legs. So what an epidural is they anesthese, do kind of a spinal tap. They go inside of your spine, which there is a risk of them missing. And granted, they went to all kinds of years of medical school, so hopefully they won't, to learn this. They could OD you, it's crazy, but they could miss and paralyze you, so that's a risk. Again, hopefully that doesn't happen. But what happens is they put this anesthesia into your spinal cord, so everything below the spinal cord you can't feel. So there's a chance you can't feel pressure. You cannot stand any longer. So it not only does it wire you up to this anesthesia from these bags, from this pole thing in the hospital. I'm sure there's words for those. It disallows you from using your legs, so you can't use the leverage of your legs, so you are bound to a bed birth, whether it's on your side, which some doctors may let you, on your back, but you can no longer hold your own weight. I didn't realize that, and so you need to know that. You need to know that before you decide to get an epidural. Now, I did assist a birth at one point where this woman was just not birthing. Like, she had done a lot, and she's like, I want an epidural, it hurts too bad. So when she did get the epidural, it's like her whole body was able to relax, and then the baby came right out. Like, she pushed like 3 or 4 times after the epidural, and that baby was out. But those are two very different, drastic things. Granted, the woman who wanted the epidural had done it all naturally, didn't want any IV anything. That was also very interesting. In that birth, she kept saying, no, I don't want the IV. And they're like, well, just in case. She's like, I don't need anything just in case. I don't want the meds. I don't want this. I don't want any of that. She sent the same nurse out 3 times saying no. They sent a different nurse in just to start doing it without consent. And she's like, I told the other one no. She got mad at that point. I told the other one no, get out of here. So it's really interesting. And when I've talked to people in the birth world, in the Western medical world, it's like they have a certain amount. It's kind of like a quota. They have to do these protocol interventions because that's what their job is. Their job isn't to serve you and your needs. Their job is to administer these protocols for profit. So another hospital birth I was in at a different hospital, the surgeon came in after a C-section. Again, sometimes you need C-sections. In this case, I feel like the C-section was warranted because it's so nuanced, it's so complex. Oftentimes women have sexual history, sexual trauma, sexual violations, rape, etc. If you are dealing with that kind of trauma in your vagina, in your womb area, you're going to hit a wall at some point, and the wall is literally going to be an emotional wall, where you cannot express your full rage or anger or grief because you don't want to be seen. We're taught to be nice, date quieta, be good, be a lady. Birth is not about being a lady. Birth is primal. Birth is fierce. Birth is raw. Birth is fucking all the things. And if you are unable in your emotional state to go to that grief place, go to that fear place, go to that rage place, you're probably going to need a C-section. Now, the incidence of that is way higher if you're in a hospital setting, because they're constantly interrupting your natural ability to go to your own personal emotional places. Many of the birth workers or the doctors are male. And if you're a person of color, many of the doctors do not look like you, so you're also not comfortable. Also, if your partner or your husband or your mother-in-law or your mother is in the room and you have some kind of sexual shame based on them, or they don't know about your violations, you're not going to be able to go to that place and push through it and like literally become the rage of your rape as you push through, as it heals, because the only way out is through. So when I have seen C-sections happen in hospitals, well, clearly I haven't seen a C-section happen at home, but when I've seen C-sections have to happen as opposed to vaginal birth in hospitals, it is because the woman is literally unable to dilate based on the fact that they are emotionally holding back what needs to be worked through the birth canal, because our traumas are stored in our bodies and we need to express those. So that's something that we don't talk about, right? Really intense. Let me see. I made a list. Oxytocin. So that same birth that there was a C-section, afterwards the baby was latched. When babies latch onto your nipples, they produce what's called oxytocin, which is the natural form of Pitocin, which contracts the womb. So when the baby latches, literally the womb begins to contract and the bleeding will stop. That's your body's natural mechanism to help the bleeding stop. When they don't give you your baby to latch right away, then that mechanism doesn't enact right away, right? So a lot of the times, and they say it's protocol, they will take your baby from you. They take your baby and your baby is unable to do its job in helping you heal. Then they tell you, oh, sorry, it's too hard, you can't latch. And they make you believe that your baby can't latch onto you. If your baby's going to latch on a bottle, of course it could latch onto you. I have seen in a home birth and with my son, directly following birth, your baby will start going because it is innate, inborn, intrinsic in their body system to do that. But they have to be given to you first. You need to hold your baby. So if you want to choose a hospital setting, if you're at high risk or whatever, then really make sure whoever is birthing with you knows baby to me, especially if you had a C-section. Okay? And I know that there's all kinds of interesting ways that they will talk about your baby in danger, your baby distress, your baby whatever. The way to get your baby out of distress is for them to be with you in your heart. They spend all that time in your belly hearing your heartbeat from the inside, and then all of a sudden they just take your baby away from you. I've seen pictures of infants born in C-sections being taken away from their parents and literally reaching, like a newborn baby out of the womb, reaching for their mom. It's really, really scary the way they just take your babies from you. You don't know where they're doing, what they're doing. They're shoot them up with all kinds of stuff that you may or may not have consented to, that you may or may not know the full risks or repercussions of. They're going to be in strangers' hands in bright lights. This is the exact opposite of the home of your body that they've lived in for 10 moons. Not to mention it doesn't feel safe as the mom is pestered, interrupted, and disregarded repeatedly. The cervix responds to danger. Exactly. Thank you, Prima. So it's really you have to be so intentional in the birthing space about what it is you want. They take your agency away repeatedly. And for many of us, it's not an accident they don't teach us anatomy in our schools. It's not an accident there's shame around our genitals. There is an ongoing movement in my belief system and in like what I've seen and how I've seen, on the legacy of Marion Sims, to take the agency of our own bodies away and give it to someone else. When we've gotten birth taken away from us is honestly when all of the issues of indoctrinated, colonized, enslaved, etc. people began. They take away your babies from you. Who's the master now, right? It's insidious. I want to emphasize that I am not trying to demonize the humans necessarily that work in the medical industrial complex, but bring to light the fact that the medical industrial complex is a for-profit business to benefit certain people, and they don't care about you and your body. They care about the protocol and the quota. And some doctors might care about you and your body, but those doctors are employees of the bottom line. And that's just real. That doesn't mean they don't care, but they're also gone to 5-10 years of medical training that indoctrinates them, thinking that the protocol is the best for you, but they're not even necessarily asking the questions that make it the best for you. There is a podcast called Evidence-Based Birth, and it's by a woman who was in the medical industrial complex and had a really traumatic birth, and then started doing all this research. So for her, it's whether the research shows it. I definitely am into a lot of what she says, but at the same time, we have to remember that this research and this research paradigm is by the white supremacist patriarchy, and it doesn't honor, like, one of the things, it's like, I can't remember, talking about a particular herb, or does this thing help in labor? And they're like, well, the research doesn't show that, but it's a Chinese medicine thing. I can't remember the thing right now. And I was like, because there is research that shows that, but it's not medical industrial complex sanctioned research, right? So you have to know who is funding the research you're looking at, and who it's available to, and for what purpose, and whose benefit. So before I get off, more and more, you just really need to have a support system. I am going to be consistently and constantly a huge advocate for home birth, because you know what? If you need to get transferred to the ER, that's available. That's possible. I know women who have gotten transferred to the ER because they just weren't opening, or there could very well be some kind of issue, like the baby shoulder is stuck behind the pelvis, which does happen. I was a C-section baby. My mom woke up and started hemorrhaging, and she needed to get me cut out so she wouldn't bleed to death before I was born. That's fucking real. And so there are places for that to be honored in the hospital. If you do want a hospital birth, I'm super about birthing center births that are usually attached to a hospital, so you can get there fast if you feel like there's a risk. But we need to have safe birthing places for our soul place, so that we can really tune into what our birthing body needs, and not everyone is the same. More than anything, if you do want a hospital birth, if you want a scheduled C-section, just know what your body needs, and have done the research. Don't just listen to one doctor who tells you one thing, including myself. Do your research, know your options, and choose from an informed place so that you can have at least the most informed birth possible. Mine was a home birth and was by far what I wanted it to be. But I knew what I was choosing, and I had the agency to do that, even though I might not have used my agency, right? It's nuanced, it's complex, and it's your body. It's your body. It's your body. So the biggest lesson I have here is choose you first. Okay, not what some dude with 8 years of surgical training does. Know that obstetricians are trained in surgery, not in natural birth. Midwives are trained in natural birth, but midwives are also under the man's guise, or under the man's, a midwife has to follow the rules too, or they get debarred, or whatever you call it, delicensed. It's intense, it's complex, and it's still your body. So do your research, choose wisely. If you feel like supporting me, you can drop some monies into my Venmo, Eutimia-Montoya, PayPal, eutimia@gmail.com, Cash App @Muse Medicina, or my Patreon to support me monthly with however much money you want. That would be helpful. If not, this is free information. Spread it wide. We need to be informed about our bodies, and we are decolonizing every moment by honoring our own body autonomy. So All the body autonomy power to you. Many blessings. Have a beautiful and blessed November 1st. Happy All Souls Day, All Saints Day, and may your journeys through the veil be also by and for your intentionality and for the healing of all of our ancestors. Ciao.